not only to this country, to the state of Texas, to the city of Houston, but to his family and this Rotary Club of Houston. Who is this key speaker of the day? Well, he's a veteran naval officer, a graduate of the University of Houston, where he served as the chairman of the Board of Regents. He also was recognized as a distinguished alumnus and received an honorary doctorate degree. He's a successful real estate developer, credited with the development of several master plan communities, including Jamaica Beach and Tiki Island in Galveston County. He's also responsible for the development of numerous apartments, retail centers, hotels, and office buildings. He's held positions in the administrations of President Dwight Eisenhower and President John Kennedy. He witnessed the test of both an atomic and hydrogen bomb. He served as special ambassador for Nicaragua by appointment of President Lyndon Johnson. He served as chairman of the board of 2 Houston banks and chairman of an American stock exchange company. He served on the board of directors for our own hometown Houston Astros, a team that he once owned 10% of. He currently serves as chairman of the Welcome Group, an entity that owns more than 4 million square feet of manufacturing and industrial properties throughout the state of Texas. Our speaker today has been inducted in the Texas Business Hall of Fame, honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Houston Business Journal, and is the recent recipient of the 2019 Distinguished Citizen Award presented by the Rotary Club of Houston. Our speaker has been married to his college sweetheart Joanne for over 70 years. Together they have 5 children, 16 grandchildren, and 16 great-great-grandchildren. This is the first time that I have ever covered the skyline of Houston with so many successes by just one man. And despite all of his successes, including being an accomplished author, he is one of the most personable and kind Southern gentlemen you'll ever meet. I don't think it's any coincidence that his new book is appropriately titled, Always Welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please join me in welcoming an icon of the city, a fellow Rotarian, and our dear friend, Welcome Wilson Sr.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good? We're good. I asked that one time and somebody yelled from the back, "It's too loud and we can still hear you." I'm gonna move this up. I have some notes here. I don't need the notes. I actually have a photographic memory, but some days I'm out of film. I used that joke when I was speaking to a high school. Nobody laughed. And afterwards, our teacher came up to me and said, "Mr. Wilson, these kids have never heard of film for cameras." It's a good point. I'm happy to be here, especially on D-Day.
Louder and funnier.
I was much involved with D-Day. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, I was much involved with D-Day, although I was only 16 years old.
Wow.
So if you want to know what I was doing on D-Day, ask me during the questions. I also going to mention being 91 years old. Rich, if you overhear me talking about happy hour, I'm talking about a nap. It's not all bad. Everything I buy comes with a lifetime guarantee, Joe. I've known 6 presidents very well, served under 2. And today I'm going to concentrate on 3 of those presidents. Because everybody knows the Bushes from Texas, and everybody knows Ronald Reagan. So I'm going to concentrate on Dwight Eisenhower, John F. Kennedy, and Lyndon Baines Johnson. I've met Donald Trump. I don't know him. If you want to know what I think of Donald Trump, ask me any questions. I first met Dwight Eisenhower when I was sent by the mayor of Houston in 1954 to a national defense conference at the White House. It was a conference for mayors, and the mayor couldn't go, the mayor of Houston, Roy Hines. So he sent me. At the time, I was the department head in charge of civil defense. It was during the Cold War, and civil defense was a very important part. Nobody worried about traffic. Nobody worried about the economy. Everybody worried about nuclear attack. 2 years later, Eisenhower appointed me as the 5-state director of defense mobilization. And that is civil defense for the 5 states. And my job was coordinating the federal government. And we had a small office called the Natural Disaster Office, which later was spun off and it's now called FEMA. And I headed it for 5 states. But we had more disasters, natural disasters, than any other section of the country. In Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, New Mexico, and Oklahoma. We have tornadoes, we have hurricanes, and we have floods. Someone asked me earlier who I thought the best presidents that I've known. And I think it could be Dwight Eisenhower. Why? No war. Absolutely no war. And there were plenty of opportunities for Eisenhower to get us into war. For example, the Egyptians took over the Suez Canal from the the English and the French. And they invaded Egypt, get it back. Eisenhower said, you have 48 hours to get out of Egypt, or America will go in and defend Egypt. The war was canceled. In Hungary, the freedom fighters took over from the communist government, deep inside of Eastern Europe. And everybody urged Eisenhower to go in and save the freedom fighters. He refused to do it. There were 10 other incidents like those that he had the opportunity to get into a war, and he refused. That's why I think he was great. Of course, he brought us the interstate highway system, a small matter that affects our lives daily. It used to take me 50 minutes to get to work. Now it takes me 7 minutes. JFK, who I knew very well, ran on a platform in the 1960s. And we had to have the ability to fight limited wars. He got us into Vietnam, and guess what? We've been in limited wars ever since. Ever since. We're still in limited war. Eisenhower was great. But back to being 91 years old for a minute. Ted, I was always told to respect my elders, and now I don't have any. It's not all bad, Rick. No peer pressure. My agency, the Office of Defense Mobilization, was moved from being an independent agency into the Executive Office of the President, along with the Bureau of the Budget and the Council of Economic Advisors. I was promoted to a GS-17 in the civil service. A GS-17 is equivalent to a 3-star general. I was 30 years old. Because of my natural disaster money, through what is now called FEMA, I knew every elected official in my 5 states, all the congressmen, all of the senators, all of the governors, many of the state representatives and so forth, because I had the big money in the event of a disaster. And so needless to say, I knew Lyndon Johnson, who was a senator. He was elected in 1948 by 47 votes. In all of Texas, he was elected by 47 votes, which came from Duval County in the second round of counting. First, he didn't have enough votes and he lost. And then when Duval County counted them again, he won by 47 votes. They call him Landslide Slide Lyndon. My office was in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but I also had an office in the Executive Office of the President next door to the White House. And from my office, Joe, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I could look out my window, and there would be the President of the United States hitting golf balls. And I can't tell you what a warm and fuzzy feeling you got. This country is in such great shape, the President of the United States is hitting golf balls. Eisenhower was wonderful. The president I want to talk about is John F. Kennedy, his successor. After he got the nomination in 1960 in August, he came to my hotel room in Washington, D.C. in September. That makes me sound very important. If you want to know the real story, ask me during the questions.
Was your mother there?
I served under John F. Kennedy for 9 months and then resigned my high-ranking office. If you want to know why I resigned, ask me during the questions. I resigned to become a real estate developer in Galveston and Houston. Jamaica Beach was my first project. Later I did Tiki Island and others that are now separate cities in Galveston County. In 1962, John F. Kennedy came to Houston to announce the Manned Spacecraft Center in Houston. The mayor called me and put me in charge of the event. It was at Rice Stadium, and we had a podium in the middle of the field. The audience sat on one side of the stadium. A podium in the middle of the field with about seats for 40 dignitaries on the slant. And then in between was a platform where there were 100 cameras pointed at the podium. And being in charge, I was in charge of seating, among other things, and I did it admitted for 50 years, but I placed myself so that when the 100 cameras were pointed at Kennedy, I'd be sitting on his shoulder. and the other day, I ran across a photograph of that event, and I'm still there.
He says, put yourself.
John F. Kennedy came to Houston the day before the assassination. Jack Valenti was chairman of an event for Albert Thomas, our congressman. In all of Harris County, we only had one congressman, Albert Thomas. It was the most populous congressional district in America. It had double the amount of people that it needed for a congressman. But Albert Thomas always wanted to be the only guy. And finally he relinquished, and they cut the district in half, and he chose the north side. And Bob Casey, the county judge, Robert Eccles is here, who also was county judge, but Bob Casey became the congressman from the 8th congressional district. Now we have, 4 or 5? It was the first opportunity I had to meet Jackie. She's charming. At the dinner that night, I put myself and my wife right in front of Jackie. And since I was in charge of the motorcade downtown and the arrival at the airport, appointed by Louis Couture, the mayor, and so LBJ called and said he wanted me to get a convertible for him and Senator Ralph Yarborough from Houston, from Texas. They had been squabbling because Yarborough thought that as senior senator, he ought to be selecting all the Texans appointed to federal office. And instead, the vice president was weighing in and begin first. So I said, yes, sir, Mr. Vice President, as I always did. And about a week before the event, the Secret Service came to see me. And they said, we can't have this. He's got to be in a closed limousine. Well, I thought the Secret Service controlled these things. Later that night, in LBJ's hotel suite at the Rice Hotel, welcome. The vice president controls what kind of car he drives in, not the Secret Service. And the sooner that you get that through your head, he didn't say thick head, the better off we'll both be. Anyway, I learned something about the Secret Service. So I'd assigned Johnny Goen, who was Mayor Pro Tem of Houston, to go on Air Force One and get Ralph Yarborough and take him over and put him in the first the convertible, now limousine with LBJ. So Johnny did that dutifully, and Yarborough was raising his left hand to get into the limousine. Johnny was holding the door. And he looked in there and he saw LBJ. And he jumped back and almost knocked Johnny down. And he said, I'm not getting in there with that SOB. And he stormed off and got in the press bus.
Oh,
The next day at noon, that SOB was President of the United States.
unbelievable.
Railroad never recovered.
Yarborough wasn't shot.
If you want to know what I think about the conspiracy theories,
I'm getting it.
ask me during the questions. You know, a lot of people talked about Oswald not acting alone and being put up to it and all the rest. I've got firm opinions about that. Let's talk about LBJ. Because of my FEMA money, I knew LBJ very well. He was elected in 48, and I served as five-state director in the 1950s. So I knew LBJ very well through that. And also my partner in Jamaica Beach, Jack Valenti, handled his campaign for vice president and president. Advertising. He was an advertising executive in Houston. After the assassination, everybody knew that Kennedy was shot, but nobody in the world knew he was dead, except the doctors at Parkland Hospital. So when the LBJ's vehicle arrived in Dallas at Parkland Hospital, they told him for the first time that Kennedy was dead and he was president of the United States. And the first words out of his mouth were, "Get me Jack Valenti." Valenti was there. The LBJ had asked him to come to Dallas and Fort Worth for breakfast, and then Dallas for the motorcade. And so Valenti was there. Afterward, Jack Valenti married Mary Margaret Wiley, LBJ's longtime secretary. And they lived in River Oaks in Houston, right around the corner from me. I'd like to end this talk with a story about LBJ. I got a call one day from Valenti who said that the vice president was going to be in town this weekend. And he wanted the guys to come by Valenti's house on Sunday for a drink, a glass of wine, and so he could visit with them. The guys being the 5 partners of Jamaica Beach. Johnny Goen, later Mayor Pro Tem of Houston, 22 years. My brother Jack, later a Pentagon official. Bill Sherrill, later a member of the Federal Reserve Board in Washington. Jack Valenti and me. So I said we'd be happy to do that, and Sunday afternoon, my wife and I went over there. And I walked in and got a glass of wine, and I looked over and LBJ was sitting in front of the fireplace in an overstuffed chair. So I took my wine and went over and sat in the overstuffed chair next to him. He was drinking decaf coffee, 1 cup after another. And you know how it is when you're with somebody important, you try to think of something of significance to talk about. So I said, Mr. Vice President, Kennedy has sent the Civil Rights Bill to Congress, but it seems to be dead. Let me pause just a second to tell you why it was dead. In those days, on the East Coast, in the Midwest, and in California, they would throw their congressmen and senators out after 6 or 8 years. In the South, including Texas, we elected them for life. And so all of the seniority was in Congress was in the South. So needless to say, they were against the Civil Rights Bill. So he responded to my question, asking him to comment about it. At first I could tell he was trying to decide whether or not I was important enough to give a real answer to. And I must have passed the test because he put down his decaf coffee and he said, "Welcome, let me tell you a story." He said, when we were campaigning for vice president and president, the vice president's entourage was traveling through New Mexico. And he said, "Welcome, you know how New Mexico is. You travel for hours and you see nothing but cactus. And then suddenly you come upon a two-story service station on the side of the road." He called it filling station, which is what we called it in those days. And he said, you pull in there and you get a Coke, you go to the bathroom, you fill it with gas, and then you go on. So the vice president's entourage of about 7 cars did that. But when we got ready to leave, there was one girl missing. And he said, "Welcome, we looked everywhere in that filling station for that girl and couldn't find her. She worked in the majority leader's office in Washington." Johnson was the majority leader at the time of the Senate. And he said after about 5 or 6 minutes, she walked in the back door. "Well, welcome," he said. It turned out she had been a block behind the building, squatting down behind the bush to go to the bathroom because she was black. And they would not let her use the restroom in the service station. And he grabbed my knee with his left hand, and he pointed his right finger in my face, and he said, "Welcome, that's wrong. That is wrong." And I'll never forget his next words, which were, "And when I'm in a position to do something about it, I'm going to." That was the spring of 1963. 6 months later, he's president of the United States. 6 months after that, against all odds, he passes the Civil Rights Act of 1964. All right, I'm ready for some softball questions. Let's go, Joe. Joe.
Opened up a can of worms. You said that Lyndon Johnson's the one who decided that when they were in Dallas, he was going to be in an open convertible. I have never heard conspiracy theorists say that maybe Johnson was the one that set this thing up. But I've never heard that fact, that the vice president determined whether it was open or closed. Is that what you just said?
The vice president determines his car.
Oh, I thought it was the president's car in Texas. Whoa.
That was the president determines his car.
Okay. Well, my question is, during your era, the most important, powerful people were in office, Sam Rayburn and Albert Thomas. What happened that we lost all of that strength? NASA, I was there over the weekend. There's very little over there. It's all in Alabama. How did that happen?
Well, I don't know. But it's true. In those days, Texas had 9 major chairmanships. Texas alone, including appropriations in the House and banking in the House. And like he says, it's gone now. Next question. Yes, sir.
Welcome. At great personal risk, since you don't look anything like Marilyn Monroe, I am dying, perhaps not dying, but wanting to know, why did JFK come to your hotel room?
Let me tell you the real story. He was nominated in August, and I was in Washington, D.C. at the Congressional Hotel near the Capitol with the Director of Civil Defense from New Mexico. He had formerly been the mayor of Carlsbad, New Mexico. So we decided to have the New Mexico delegations over for drinks. We had a suite. And so they had two congressmen, only two congressmen, and two senators. So we invited them, they all agreed to come. And then at the last minute, we had the idea of inviting JFK, who had just been nominated. So we called JFK, the campaign headquarters, and he agreed to come. And so he came and stayed about an hour. Most charming man I ever met in my life. Charisma coming out the ears.
Kind of like Rick. Kind of like Rick.
Like Rick Olson. But just a glow seemed to follow him around the room. And I think it was all in his smile. When you think about it, LBJ, who he defeated in the primary, seldom smiled. Richard Nixon never smiled. And the people elected a young man who smiled a lot. And he was very, very charismatic.
Was Jackie?
Yes, she didn't talk a lot, but God, she was beautiful.
One more here. One more shoot.
Okay, welcome. Your book, Always Welcome, is one of the most exciting books I've ever read. It's informative. Yes, thank you. It is informative, encouraging, exciting, and challenging. I bought a bunch of copies of it and gave it to my sons and my granddaughters and my friends. And they said they had no idea that one man could accomplish so much in so little time. So, always welcome. Where can your book be published? I mean, where can it be purchased, if you please? Because when you, this is what I can't get over. When you were living on River Oaks Boulevard, you had a situation and you wanted to prove to those to whom you owed a little bit of money that you weren't going to pay lawn people to come out and cut your yard, and you did it yourself. That was incredible. That's courage and guts and stick-to-itiveness.
I went through a hard period financially, so I was behind in every bank in town. So I figured if they saw me out cutting my own lawn, they'd be more sympathetic about me living on River Oaks Boulevard.
Was it a push mower?
And,
A push mower?
yes,
It was a push mower. It didn't have a motor.
no motor.
We all helped. We're all out there.
So anyway,
Well,
the
the rate
book
you
is
were
available. Please buy it. I need the money.
Is this the in the
Welcome.
house?
If
No,
you
they moved
would,
after my sister.
June
Last sister.
6, 1944, D-Day. Where were you and what were you doing?
I was 16 years old in 1944, and I was a newscaster on a local radio station in Brownsville, Texas.
Oh my God.
Why, at age 16, was I a newscaster? Because if you were 17 and a half, you were gone. And so all the jobs were held by 16 and 17-year-olds. Of course, my father owned the radio station. I'm sure that had nothing to do with it. But I was so excited about D-Day because I'd been following the news, because being a newscaster for 2 years. And it was so exciting. We've been waiting for that moment forever. And I preempted all of the broadcasts and just kept on continually reporting on the invasion, which was very, very exciting.
You know, as is tradition in the Rotary Club of Houston, we always give the gift of appreciation. But what do you give a man who has served for 3 presidents, been on the board of numerous directors, holds an honorary doctorate degree, on the Astros? What can we give you? And I tell you, my heart was open when I heard you mention that you and Joanne went and enjoyed a beautiful glass of wine with LBJ. And I thought, what better gift than to give a man who has improved with age than a beverage that also improves with age. Drink a bottle of wine.
It looks expensive.
We're the Rotary Club of Houston, that's how we roll.